And welcome back to coverage here of the Strixhaven Championship. Marshall Sutcliffe with Paul Cheon. And we're entering the second round of the day here as we come in. Thanks so much for coming along with us. We certainly appreciate you taking the time to hang. Paul, down in the feature match, boy, we've got two heavy hitters here from Brazil. We've got Carlos Romao and Paulo Vitor Damo, Rosa, two world champions, 20 years apart from each other about. So, spanning many generations of Brazilian professional Magic players, and they're ready to face off against each other. Interesting to note here as well as we take a look at Paulo Vitor. He's brought Jeskai Turns to the table here, kind of the breakout deck of the tournament. But Carlos Romao trying to make his mark on this tournament as well. He's playing Dimir Control.
Yeah, and this is a deck we don't see all that often. We see Andrew Cuneo, typically the person who likes to bring this deck to the tournament, but Carlos choosing to bring this here, classic Dimir control deck, lots of removal spells, hand disruption, and counter magic, and very few ways to actually win the game. As you can see, one of the key cards there posted in Shark Typhoon, 3 copies of that, basically the only way to kind of win the game. Outside of the one Jace Wielder of Mysteries as well. This is not a Tainted Pack deck or anything like that, but it is potentially a win condition because he's looking to really dig deep into his deck.
That's right. Yeah, really interesting. That's one of the things that you'll look at when you take a look at a control deck that you haven't seen before. What are the win conditions? How does this work? And, Carlos taking advantage of the fact that Shark Typhoon can be somewhat of an answer or a card that you can just use to get through your library, but also can absolutely win you the game in the late game. And he really does have ways to churn through his library as well. Of course, here in Historic, you get access to cards like Brainstorm that we see now from Paulo. There's also one in hand for Carlos. And I expect a lot of posturing here in the early stages, Paul. Neither player is really incentivized to go for anything big too early. From Carlos's perspective, well, he just doesn't have that many big things to go for in the early to mid part of the game anyway. And from Paulo's perspective, he's going to have to churn through a lot. Probably will prefer to try to set up for a turn where he can out mana his opponent and then perhaps win some type of counter battle.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about this Jeskai Turns deck is it has the ability to get ahead on mana because you can create treasure with Magma Opus and Prismari Command. Mm-hmm. The big thing for Carlos is, of course, just making sure that he has some ways to kind of stem the bleeding early or have some get counter magic to interact with what Paulo's trying to do. The nice thing, though, is you're playing a Dimir control deck. Even if you don't have a counter spell in your hand, if you just pass with 3 or 4 mana up, it's very unlikely that Paulo's going to go for it. So, you look at Carlos's hand, and you're thinking, well, he's in trouble. He doesn't have any counter magic, but, he's got time. He's got time. Paulo's not just going to go for it on turn 4, most likely, unless he has that memory lapse backup.
That's right. And, the interesting thing that I'm going to keep an eye on here is how treasure tokens interact here, right? Because normally when you think of 2 decks that have this sort of controlling mode, the one with the most mana is the one who's advantaged. And interestingly, Paulo can actually kind of turbo out some extra mana via treasure tokens with Prismari Command and Magma Opus. And that might actually buy him the wiggle room he needs to get that chain going with Velomachus.
Yeah. One interesting thing to note here in the matchup is typically these Jeskai Turns decks only play 1 island. The reason being is you want as many mountains as possible so that your Dwarven Mines can get turned on as quickly as possible, right? You want as many mountains as possible to be able to potentially go turn 4 Indomitable Creativity. And as a result, this could be a situation, especially in the sideboard games where there's a lot more counter spells involved, where Paulo might be shorter on blue sources. Carlos could use those Field of Ruins to help kind of minimize the number of blue sources that Paulo has out in play.
Yeah, kind of interesting how that'll play out. Paulo does run 2 islands.
Okay, he's playing 2.
Yeah, so he'll have a little bit of an extra shield there, but still really interesting. Little subplots happening here as we work our way along. Land number 4 hits the battlefield for Romao, but as is often the case with these control decks, it's just a land go type situation. So he passes a turn back over to Paulo, who draws his other island.
He did run out the island, meaning that he can't go for the Indomitable Creativity here. Mm-hmm. Although we know that if he did, it would be successful, and he could potentially just have won on the spot right there. But of course, choosing to play it a little more safe, as you are playing against a control deck that's got all kinds of instant speed removal and counter magic.
Yeah, you brought this up. This is what you were talking about. Yeah, the hand wasn't there for Carlos, but he's able to represent such a scary scenario for Paulo that Paulo doesn't even really give it much thought about going for it. In fact, not even giving himself the chance by playing the island anyway. But like you said, it would have actually worked. The Fatal Push is actually fairly handy for taking out the 1/1 tokens, but it doesn't interact with the treasure on the other side. And Paulo actually would have got a Velomachus onto the battlefield and had it cleanly attack that turn if he would have gone for it.
And yeah, now Carlos weighing whether or not he wants to run out the Narset here and still represent a memory lapse, or just keep all the mana available so that Paulo, keeps kind of Paulo at base still has the ability to scry with Castle Vantress to find some action. So playing this Narset is really, really good for Paulo, because now you know that Carlos can only have one counterspell available here for the most part. So what Paulo can choose to do is Prismari Command, make a token, next turn, he can go for the Indomitable Creativity and still have Memory Lapse backup to fight whatever Carlos might have.
Look at Carlos may have it depends on what he takes. All right, he's going to go for Heartless Act to give himself an actual out to kill Velomachus. But interestingly, the Inquisition of Kozilek could have taken Indomitable Creativity there, which might have served him better. But of course, with unknown information,
yeah,
you're just going to take the safe route here.
Although I do imagine that Paulo would have lapsed the Inquisition and leave Carlos on just one mana and just go for it. The nice thing also is, if Mystical Dispute was a card that you would be afraid of, don't have to worry about it when you're casting Indomitable Creativity.
That's right. Yeah, Paulo's in a nice position here with the Memory Lapse in hand. He could have lapsed the Inquisition, as you said, or as you also mentioned, he can set up to lapse the Heartless Act here.
Yeah, and we're going to see Paulo go for it here.
Yep.
The coast is clear. You have Indomitable Creativity for 1, while also having mana for the Memory Lapse. Exactly enough mana here due to the mana advantage created from the Prismari command.
That's right. Those treasure tokens really did do exactly what we had talked about, where we're going to see Heartless Act, but it is going to get countered thanks to the mana advantage here from Paulo, and now he gets to get on that magic carpet and ride. Let's see if this Velomachus can earn him the victory right now. He's going to attack Narset, but the trigger happens regardless.
Oh, he whiffed!
He straight whiffed?
Oh, and there's a Heartless Act here, which got Memory Lapse, of course. Got a little too excited there. We did know he had the Heartless Act on top, but now, Paulo had the opportunity to potentially win on the spot there, and now, he's got some action in his hand, but Carlos is just right back in it.
Does not happen very often. I didn't get the chance to see what he saw. There's also a world where there was a brainstorm in there, but that ends up being really bad with Narset out. So you just say, yeah, no, I'm not going to do it. But Heartless Act now kills Velomachus.
Chase
the
time?
Game is back on. Wow.
It's Jace time.
Paul, how many times did you whiff with Velomachus in testing for being in the booth here?
A handful of times, but of course the chance of whiffing is very, very low.
I whiffed once. Actual one time, just hit absolutely nothing. Oh, and it's my Hardcast Shark Typhoon. We saw Paulo do this last round, and he's back at it again. You can see the game plan for him, and yeah, tough spot here for Carlos, who sees Time Warp as well as Mizzix's Mastery. Mastery has such a higher ceiling. He's going to take that away. But, you can see already the advantage that Paulo has now with Shark Typhoon just sitting there on the battlefield. He can just go for Time Warp, make a 5/5, and take another turn after that. It's going to be really tough for him from here.
Yeah. The nice thing is that at least these fatal pushes that Carlos has in his hand will kill the first few shark tokens, right? And Carlos is the one drawing multiple cards a turn, right? Carlos is the one that's drawing extra cards off the J. So, I think this is close. I know Carlos doesn't have an actual answer to the Shark Typhoon, but, at the same time, he's the one drawing 2 cards a turn.
You're more you're disrespecting the Shark Typhoon is what you're doing right now, Paul. You think this is close? Every single time Paulo casts a spell, he gets to just grab a bunch of stuff. There's no way that Carlos can keep up on a card for card basis with that. Am I wrong?
Unless he's drawing 2 cards a turn.
Okay. Let's see what happens. Here's Brainstorm, and Paulo's found a couple of lands, Prismari Command, and a Magma Opus. It looks like he's considering protecting the Magma Opus by putting it on top of his library. One of the many things you can do with Brainstorm, and a very heads-up play here. All right. Carlos, do you want a Fatal Push, a 1/1?
No, he's going to scry here.
All right.
Actually, he does have an answer. That Blast Zone is in play. It's going to take some time.
Oh!
Right? But you could tick it up to 6 and eventually get that Shark Typhoon off the battlefield.
Okay, now that's interesting.
Ooh, memory lapsing something. You still get that token, but
Gets memory in the yard and Narset in the hand. That is exactly where you want to be. Does he have enough mana to go for it?
Not quite. It looks like he's 1 short. He's 1 short, but the Narset should be safe. He might actually choose to not activate the Narset this turn in case Paulo has something like a Prismari Command.
Okay. Yeah, Paulo also is forced to decide now. If I was going to try to draw the cards with Prismari Command, now's my window. This will expose the Magma Opus that he has on top of the or did he mill? Who got milled here? Yeah, it's still on top of his library.
Carlos
decided
milled
to mill himself, right?
Yeah.
So I was curious because, Paulo did put 2 cards back on top, and it would be reasonable to assume that one of them was one that he wanted to protect from Thoughtseize, so a consideration there for Carlos. But yeah, he wants to get it into his hand. He does have to get rid of the lands, and he's not quite at the range yet to cast it.
Okay.
He needs a land.
Yeah. Paulo needs a land off the top to be able to actually cast this Magma Opus. Now,
Yeah.
Carlos does have multiple memory lapses, but every time you lapse a Magma Opus,
It's an 8/8.
that's an 8/8 shark.
Real big shark. There's a
the
Fatal
land.
Passage. Wait, now hold on a second. He's got 6 mountains, so assuming that there's still those other 2 mountains floating around, then he should be okay. Because that's all of his. He's got most of his basics on the battlefield. It's actually very
6
strange.
mountains.
Yeah, 6 mountains.
Yeah.
Right, and he's got 4 on the battlefield, so he should have 2 left. But it is a little weird to see the mana set up like this. Now let's remember also that Magma Opus is an instant.
Oh, but does Carlos? Carlos, do you want to leave yourself vulnerable to a Magma Opus here? Right?
Yeah,
Paulo can now respond with a Magma Opus.
Yeah, he won't get the cards, but
Right, but he can kill the Narset and not get destroyed by the Narset memory combo.
Yes.
Why would you go for it? And you can see Carlos's face. Oh no, this is gonna happen. This Magma Opus will get cash. You're not gonna be able to memory. You're not gonna be able to go 7 cards versus 0 on the following turn.
wow. You see that, palm to forehead there from Carlos Romao. And we're going to see some loyalty disappear from these planeswalkers. Most importantly, Narset will no longer be on the battlefield.
Right, and now Carlos has to deal with an 8/8, a 4/4, a 1/1, and doesn't have the Narset anymore.
That's right. Yeah, this is going to be tough. There's a Drown on the Lock, so that'll give him an answer to 1. And now he's going to start targeting Paulo. And there's another removal spell.
That was great. I mean, he found 2 removal spells, so now he can deal with the 8/8 and the 4/4, and he's got a couple lapses, so he's actually doing fine.
He's decided to pass the turn, which is going to actually open up Paulo to being able to cast a memory lapse, which he'll be fine with just getting that thing out of his hand.
Right, but if your lapse gets lapsed, then all of a sudden you're drawing a lapse, which might not be a
Yes.
powerful enough card that you want to draw in this at this phase in the game.
True. Yeah, yeah. Paulo probably feels like he doesn't have a choice. Just if he can cast it, he needs to get the shark out of it and do his thing. But yeah, that's pretty rough.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Paulo has a choice though. He might
Right.
want to really just save this 8/8.
He does know about the memory lapse in hand
Right.
for Carlos, so he does have that. We're going to see how much Paulo values getting a clean
Okay.
draw step, and so far it looks like quite a bit. Carlos is not going to lose Jace here regardless, but using a Drown in the Lock keeps Jace's loyalty as high as possible.
Yeah, and Paulo's in a lot of trouble now. He knows about the lapse. He doesn't want to draw a memory lapse here.
Right? He knows he needs to find more action.
Yeah, a time warp, just anything. Because if that gets countered,
Right.
that's totally fine. You're making a
Right.
5/5 every single time you try.
Definitely.
And at this point, Paulo has 7 mana. You're not as concerned about what he can do at instant speed. Now I believe the coast is clear to put a counter on Blast Zone. Whereas in the previous turn, with your opponent showing 8 mana, you absolutely do not want to do that.
Now that's up to 3 counters on the Blast Zone.
Yep.
Okay. Oh boy, Paul's going to be bummed to see those 2 cards go to the yard. It was Mizzix's Mastery and a Prismari Command. Those are the type of cards that he wants to see. And of course, he's going to draw a land. Now, it is a cycling land. He can continue to chip away at Jace's loyalty.
And things are going to get extremely difficult now because now Carlos can just tick up the Blast Zone up to 6 here. And with the double memory lapse, I mean, with the
Boy, is
Jace
that
going.
Blast Zone really going to get the job done here? That's incredible.
That's why you play it, I guess, right?
Yeah.
It answers everything technically, just takes a while.
Paulo cycles into Magma Opus.
Oh, the old Blast Zone for 6. No big deal.
It is up to 6. Oh, and there's another Narset as well. Carlos Romao just grinding here with Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, multiple counter spells, and some really nice sequences that happened there. You know, that turn where it was Memory into the yard and Narset in the hand off of a Jace was pretty sweet.
Right. And yeah, he's going to want to blow this up now, right? You don't want your opponent to cast anything on their turn. So I mean, sacking the Blast Zone now with double memory lapse and everything that he has in hand. I mean, yeah, Carlos is going to beat the Shark Typhoon.
Wow,
most
you were
likely.
right, Paul. Unbelievable. He doesn't even look happy about it either. Like, come on, Carlos.
Marshall, I appreciate a hard cast Shark Typhoon.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not as much as you, but you know, it's up there. You know, I really do appreciate it. But you know, just given the fact that Paulo really had not much else left to work with there, and Carlos with that Jason play, you know.
Yeah, you're more of a Blast Zone guy. I get it. I understand. Yeah, we all got to plant our flag somewhere, you know.
Oh man.
Magma Opus currently stranded in hand. Oh! Another shark. This one is going to have to cycle.
Yeah.
The memory lapse in hand just too strong here for Carlos. Paulo just doesn't have the time to fiddle around with casting 6 mana spells that don't do anything if they get memory lapsed. And here comes Narset again.
Yeah. And just kind of wanting to go back to that pivotal point where Carlos did activate the Blast Zone and nearly lost the game because of it. But, you know, that draw step of a removal spell, right, where he was facing up against a big shark and the 4/4 was really, really huge.
Yeah, he drew 2 removal spells on that turn, and that was what turned it around. He did need to see those cards. But now he's well and truly in control here. I mean, Paulo's got a very powerful hand. He can cycle Shark Typhoon, and he does have Magma Opus, but the prospect of actually resolving that Opus looks very low. And now there's a good backup plan here for Romao with Extinction Event for you know, any tokens that end up on the battlefield.
Yeah. Now, Carlos doesn't have an immediate answer to the Shark Typhoon here. He can just choose to cycle Shark Typhoon for 1, still have Memory Lapse up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So might do that to try to save one of his planeswalkers. But I mean, Carlos is just, I think, on the win via Jace plan. You know,
Yeah, he
the
could.
he's getting there. He's been milling Paulo nearly every single turn.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, just even if you just look at I'm, Carlos has got to be, Paulo has got to be down to something like 20 cards left in his deck.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he was just under 20. It was 20 exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, good call, Paul. Damn. It's just estimating it. That said, Jace did take a big hit here. Both of the creatures actually ended up attacking Jace, and then there's also going to be an annoying 1/1 token on the battlefield that lines up pretty well with the Planeswalkers. So a Brainstorm, oof, not much there for Carlos. A couple of lands, he's going to have to draw one of them at least. He can shuffle away the other with Passage if he wants. He can even just mill it away.
I wonder if Carlos milled the other mountain, because if he did, then the Field of Ruin would just be able to effectively act as a strip mine against the Dwarven mine.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, better, because you get your land.
What Paulo's outlook is here. You know, he's got the Magma Opus, but he knows about a memory lapse in hand here for Carlos. And, I mean,
well, the hope
just do nothing.
The hope is just you cast it end of turn, you get it lapsed, then you just cast it again.
And just
right,
cross your fingers.
I mean, at this point, you just have to try to brute force your way through because Carlos just has access to so many extra resources here with the Narset, the Jace, Castle Vantress.
It'll be pretty bad news here for Paulo when he saw it coming, and you see that look on his face, and he knows, well, the chance now I'm never going to resolve this Magma Opus.
Okay.
Now he's really never going to resolve this Magma Opus, and that's probably the death knell here for Paulo. He has no board left. He's facing down 2 Planeswalkers, and he's going to be cold top decking here against an opponent with 1, 2, 3 counter spells in hand at the moment. Not going to say I love your chances there.
Yeah. And I will say, I mean, this is just one of those games where, like, now, you know, Carlos is firmly in the lead and likely going to win this game just because he has so many more cards. But, you know, Paulo had several opportunities in this game to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
He comboed. He got to combo out and he whiffed, right?
He did, yes.
Then he punished Carlos when he tapped out with the Magma Opus and was also looking to be in a pretty good position before Carlos drew the removal spell. So this game could have easily have been a victory for Paulo had, you know, things gone slightly differently.
Also funny, he also had the chance on turn 4, you know, to just slam it and say, hey, if you interrupt this, that's fine. But yeah, he showed some patience there, which definitely seemed correct. But then maybe he's running bad. I don't really know how to categorize it because, you know, we saw a misstep from Carlos that opened up the door for Paulo. He walked right through it. Thank you very much. He missed with Velamachus, which is extremely rare.
Yep. We're just going to see a win with a boring shark token.
Yeah, just a double hit here with the old Sharkarino. Boom, down to 8. Cool deck here from Carlos, though. This
absolutely.
Dimir control really kind of showing what it could do. Passes a turn back. Normally, you'd think that would be about the best possible draw, right? An expensive spell that draws you cards, gets you board state, removes stuff, but
this is cool. Indomitable Creativity in this matchup is just a hard removal spell.
It's just a straight up removal spell. That's pretty funny. But as you can see, with triple memory lapse and a drown in the lock, there is no way for Paulo to get out of this. And game number 1 is going to go to Carlos Romao. And he finishes the deal here. And that's going to do it for game number 1. Carlos Romao picking up the win with Dimir control over Paulo Vitor Damo Rosa. And Paulo, boy, he's going to have to consult that sideboard. And this could be pretty tricky for him, Paul, because Dimir control is not a deck you see very often in Historic.
No, absolutely not. But the thing is, you know, kind of going into the event, you expected Jeskai control, right? That was a deck that certainly should have been on people's radars. So I imagine the sideboard strategy is largely going to be very, very similar here, right? You're gonna board in you're gonna board up to the 4 copies of the Shark Typhoon. You're gonna have commenced the end game, and you're probably gonna shave some pieces of your combo, and you're also probably going to expect your opponents to bring in potentially some graveyard hate, so maybe shave on a Mizzix's Mastery or two as well.
Yeah, really interesting to see. This one's a little different than some of the builds that we've seen earlier with Nezahal. This one has commenced the end game in that spot instead, but the 4 copies of Shark Typhoon as well. The full 4 copies, I should say, here for Paulo now. Yeah, uncounterable stuff, right? It's going to make it difficult for Carlos to maneuver when Paulo can put out, effectively 6 uncounterable things. Really interesting here too. He still has Velomachus in there, still gonna threaten that combo.
Yeah, well, if you look at Carlos, I suppose, I mean, he's got some removal spells to deal with it, but he doesn't have access to Fry. So maybe Carlos can position himself in a way where he can have some counterspell backup to kind of get there with the Velomachus. Whereas when you're playing against a deck with Fry, typically what people do is just kind of board out the combo or board out Velomachus because you can't reliably, expect to kind of be able to kill your opponents with the Velomachus combo. One interesting thing on Carlos's side that you do need to consider is you can kind of expect your Jeskai Turn's opponents to board into a bunch of Shark Typhoons and potentially commence the end games. And if you do, the question is, how much removal do you keep in? Right? Because when you look at a card like Fatal Push, yeah, it's awful game 1. But after sideboard, it's a really efficient answer to those end of turn big shark tokens, end of turn commence the end game. So it might be one of those things where you might want to consider keeping some of those cards just because, just naturally speaking, you do have more cards that give you card advantage because you're not putting a bunch of combo pieces in your deck, and instead you have more counters and card draw.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's got to be a tightrope here for Carlos Romao. He's going to kick things off with Thoughtseize, and this is one way to take care of a commence the end game. Won't be able to counter it later. You can just take it away. Pretty mediocre hand here for Paulo. He's leaving him with Brainstorm and Memory Lapse. Really no other action, although he does find Shark Typhoon for the turn. Another Thoughtseize here.
Yeah, the awkward part about Paulo's hand is just the fact that his only blue source is the Fabled Passage, so he can't go the classic Brainstorm into using your Fabled Passage to shuffle away the bad cards. Now, this is less relevant after sideboard, right? Because you don't have as many dead cards, right? So, in the early phases of the game, you want your lands and your spells anyway, so it's not quite as important as it is game 1, where you get to really hide a lot of your really bad cards in specific matchups and then shuffle them away.
Boy, that worked out really well for Carlos, though. He ripped another Thoughtseize, and even though he knew about the Brainstorm and the Memory Lapse, the other 2 cards were lands in hand. He said, I'm going to fire it off here, and boom, he hit a Shark Typhoon. So those 2 Thoughtseizes have taken away 2 uncounterable threats on the other side, which makes the Memory Lapse and Saw It Coming he already had in his hand, and now the Memory Lapse that he drew for the turn look that much better.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, still not going to see a whole lot from either side here. Carlos does want to make sure that he continues to hit land drops, so might not go for it this turn. He could, but I could also see him holding off on the Shark Typhoon and trying to make a 2/2 next turn.
Carlos got to feel like he got away with something there, right? I mean,
that game 1? Yeah, game 1 was...
Yeah. I mean, and even here in the early stages of this game, like Paulo had Brainstorm in his opening hand and got effectively Thoughtseized on both turns 1 and 2 because he didn't have the untapped blue mana for it. That's one of the key interactions in a format like this is that you actually don't see people playing as much hand disruption because of the prevalence of Brainstorm now. And Paulo even had one in his opener and still got his hand properly ripped apart because of his mana.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is the one thing about this deck is that the mana is a little bit awkward, right? Because you are playing a bunch of Triomes and you're playing a bunch of Dwarven Mines, and so a bunch of your lands just kind of come into play tapped. So the deck actually doesn't have a ton of blue sources to play on turn 1 to play around that turn 1 Thoughtseize. You have access to 4 Steam Vents and 2 Islands, and I think that's it.
Mm-hmm. And as we saw, it ended up being turn 1 and even turn 2 that Paulo couldn't fire off the Brainstorm. And in fact, it's still sitting in his hand. All right, but he's got a little action here. There's an indomitable creativity with the token on the battlefield as well as Shark Typhoon going into hand here, though it looks like he's content to just pass, doesn't want to run things into the, well, very likely counters that he would face here.
So lot of good stuff here for Carlos. But the thing is, I think he still wants to continue finding land, so he's gonna have to probably look to shuffle away 2 cards here, and then crack that Fabled Passage. Now again, Paulo is at that really important 6 mana here, so you could be representing Commence the Endgame. Of course, we've already taken one, but this is the point where you have to be mindful of the fact that Paulo could have drawn another Commence or a Shark Typhoon, and it is pretty important to make sure you have an answer for that big creature.
I think I would get rid of Thoughtseize here. Like, he knows about the Brainstorm on the other side for Paulo, and yes, you still get to go 1 for a card, but Paulo has so much agency over what you actually get to take away.
Yeah, I could see an argument for Thoughtseize or maybe potentially the other Memory Lapse. But yeah, it's a great point that you made, though. Given the fact that Carlos knows about the Brainstorm, the impact of Thoughtseize will definitely be lessened.
So he's going to shuffle these away. That's going to get him a land on the battlefield, but more importantly, get him a clean look at another land off the top of the library. He looks like he's considering going for the Shark as well, and he's going to go ahead and do that. So he'll get... Ooh. No, he changed his mind. He finds another Brainstorm, so that is likely to find him a land. Though it looks like he's not going to fire it off here. He'd rather leave up 2 counter spells rather than take the risk.
Yeah.
And there's a 4/4 Shark on end step here for Paulo. There's Heartless Act in hand for Carlos to deal with it, though.
Yeah, so Carlos does have multiple answers here, right? Because he can go Heartless Act into Negate or Saw It Coming. So he can break apart the combo. Now, Paulo does have a second copy of Creativity, so he might want to just try to power through whatever disruption Carlos might have here.
Just put one on the stack and say, sure, if you do something about it, I'll live with it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's what's happening here.
And then now Carlos is going to consider just, it's like, well, do I just let this resolve? The big thing here is Carlos knows that Paulo's not playing with the Nezahal version of the deck, right? Because if your opponent's playing Nezahal, you immediately go for the removal here. But now, if Carlos's plan is to go for the Heartless Act, he can just choose to let this 1/1 die and then kill the Velomachus, because that just allows you to remove a free 1/1 off the battlefield. Alternatively, you can just go for a counterspell here and just choose to save your Heartless Act. Because
he's
there
going
are
to
other
let
threats.
Velomachus hit the battlefield, so there he is. And then the assumption here is that a Heartless Act will strike that down. Paulo perhaps wants to fight with Memory Lapse, even if he assumes that he won't ultimately win that fight. We'll see what he does.
Yeah. I imagine you're still going to go for the lapse here. Oh, I guess not. Just valuing that Memory Lapse for something that Carlos could potentially play on his turn. Okay. Knowing that it's also really likely that he's going to lose that counter war, right?
Right, exactly. Leaving him tapped out.
Ooh,
a lot of action here off that Brainstorm from Carlos. He sees another Shark Typhoon and Inquisition
but no
and
lands.
Thoughtseize, and again, no lands.
You might just see Carlos potentially just cycle the Shark Typhoon here, just to kind of get through all the cards in his deck.
No, he decided not to. I wouldn't have been surprised if he did that either, Paul, but he ultimately decided not to.
So the one downside with going for the Heartless Act play on that previous turn is, sure, you get to kill Velomachus, but you still got this 4/4 Shark that you need to deal with, right? Your hand was full of counter magic. So if you went with the counter spell line, you could use that Heartless Act on the 4/4 if that becomes problematic, and then still have a handful of counters because for later turns. Now Carlos's hope was to find land number 6 off that Brainstorm, so he can cycle his own Shark Typhoon to be able to trade. But because he was unable to find that 6th land, he's in some trouble here.
Yeah, and look at this. Paulo's really capitalizing on the fact that Carlos has been unable to hit his land drops. He's going to use his Memory Lapse to put Inquisition of Kozilek back on top of the library, which is going to further bury the chances of Carlos actually hitting lands. This is one of the sequences with memory lapse that isn't obvious when you first read it, but when your opponent needs to find lands,
Oh,
you'll put
geez.
basically anything on top of their library that isn't a land.
And that's another Shark Typhoon. I mean, I don't see how Carlos gets out of this. Now, I mean, Paulo is
Yeah.
going to be able to cycle and make a 6/6 Shark Typhoon here, along with the 4/4.
Yeah, I think that Carlos might have to activate Field of Ruin and shuffle away the 2 cards and then try to rip
And
a
look at
couple of
that.
removal spells in a row.
Very small thing to note there as well. Paulo, mindful of the fact that the Field of Ruin thing could have happened, and chose to keep the Shark Typhoon in his hand instead of on top of his library.
Yep. Well, it looks like Carlos is going to try to brute force it. He's going to go for Shark Typhoon, which is going to get a card in hand. Then he's going to draw the Shark Typhoon that he had on top of library. But that isn't getting him to those beautiful fresh cards that could actually be lands under there.
Yeah, and I don't know if if I'm on Carlos's side. I mean, you're probably just thinking about cycling Shark Typhoon for 3 and going for the double block here, and you're gonna see a gigantic head shake here when you see Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. Good call, Paul. Paul, you called it, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a gigantic head shake indeed as Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa evens things up. The mana issues there for Carlos really started to pile up on him as he went through multiple brainstorms, but was brainstorm locked, could not find lands. And Paulo, thanks to 2 Sharks, is able to get the job done here and even things up. What's been a fascinating match between these 2 world champions, one former, one current.
I feel like Carlos just has too many cards for this matchup. Where like you're looking at his sideboard, there's like a Narset in there. You know, you really do need to consider the option of having some removal. You can see now he's making the adjustment, recognizing that you do need some fatal pushes in this matchup. That's how you lose, right? With Paulo just has access to 6 of these creatures that he can make at instant speed to pressure your life total. And you need a cheap and efficient answer so you can still keep up mana for counter magic.
It's interesting to see Paulo make some changes. As you can see, the sideboards are flipped. The in and out on the sideboards are flipped on the graphic here, but quite a few changes for Paulo.
Yeah, it looks like Paulo also bringing in ways to kill opposing shark tokens, right? You have the Perilous Voyage to be able to bounce up Carlos's sharks. You see a Fry there for Narsets and again sharks.
It really does kind of feel like it's a Shark Typhoon world, and we're just living in it here for these players. You know, the uncounterable nature of it has made it powerful against both players, and they've both gone pretty hard at that as a game plan here post board.
Is that a mulligan? No.
Not yet.
Oof.
Yikes.
This is rough.
Basically, that hand's actually worse than the one prior.
Yeah.
He's got 1 land, and he has a 7-drop and 2 6-drops. We're talking about Paulo, by the way. We're looking right now at Carlos as he puts a card back on a mulligan, but I wouldn't be surprised if Paulo ends up having to go down to 5 here.
I mean, you can't really keep that hand, right? Like,
I don't think so.
his average casting cost is like 5. I mean,
he's got a 7, a 4, an 8, a 6, and a 6. Oh, he's gonna go for it.
All right, land.
Hit those lands.
Okay.
There's one.
If Paulo draws 4 lands in a row, his hand is awesome. You know, just saying. If he that's
We've
2
all been
commits
there
the
before.
onions.
Oh, there's another
there it
one.
is.
2 in a row.
Wow.
2 in a row. And let's not forget the Magma Opus can also become a treasure. And also Mystics Mastery can then get it out of the yard if the way is clear. It never will be in this situation, but there are things here. We've got things.
Paulo channeling his inner Seth Manfield here. Just keeping these hands and kind of getting there here. And Paulo.
Another land off the top. Paul, that's 3 in a row.
Wow. Is he going for mastery? Probably not, right? Going to play around the gate?
No. Yeah. Especially that he isn't. I mean, he was in a truly desperate situation. Now he's in a mildly desperate situation. This is a good one, though. Mystical Dispute, your brainstorm.
Carlos needs some thought seizes. Gotta get to those, commence the end games before he can cast
And
them.
there's land number 4 in a row, everybody.
He drew 4
That's your
lands in a
world
row.
champion at work. And look at this. Mizzix's Mastery targeting Magma Opus is going to demand a counterspell. Good news for Carlos, though. He actually has it. Oh,
No,
he let it go.
No, he's countering the Magma Opus.
Oh, okay. It's still on the stack. It's still being targeted. Yeah. Fair enough. At any rate, this is very much a kind of, do you have something right now? Because if you don't, you're going to be way behind, as it turns out. Of course, Carlos does. Paulo will have expected that would have gotten countered.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind though, Carlos also not looking bad, right? If you're from his side of the battlefield, he doesn't know Paulo had a completely terrible hand to begin with.
It looked like a pretty good hand when you're sitting in Carlos's seat. Land, you know, something to do.
So Carlos might, you know, he could look to Field of Ruin here, right? Continue putting cards into his graveyard so that you can get closer to flipping Search for Escanta. But also there's the combination of going Brainstorm into Field of Ruin, right? That allows you to kind of keep your best cards as well. So those are kind of the things that Carlos is weighing out right now.
Boy, he's really in the tank here, Paul. And I will mention as well, he just crossed the 8-minute threshold on his clock. That's a lot of time, but these games have gone long. His deck does not close out the game quickly. It can, right? Sometimes you just get a couple of sharks, and if you've got, you know, full control, then it can just be a couple of turns like we saw. But it takes a long time to get to that point.
Right, and I think he wants this land.
Well, he'll have a choice on it from his search for his Canta that he's got.
Although if he wanted to dig deeper, I wonder if he didn't want the memory lapse, I wonder if he wanted to put the memory lapse on top and shuffle it away, right?
That might be the case. It's on top of the library still, but
jeez, look at Paulo's hand. It is incredible.
Awesome. It's 3 uncounterable threats, and they all draw you cards. Like, I cannot believe that this is the turn. That this is a turn we're on, and this is what Paulo's hand still looks like. Like, he could have just had, he could be discarding the hand size 3 times by now, and this could just be effectively over. Instead, it looks pretty good for him. I mean,
but I will say, Paulo, Paulo did miss a land drop. Pretty unlucky.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
so,
unlucky. Paulo missed a land drop. Oh, I didn't even see it. I mean, I'm so not used to it. And look at Paulo. Did you see that?
He's wondering.
Funny. They're actually talking. He goes, "Really?" He gave us like a classic Paulo. Really? And Carlos is like, "Yeah, I'm doing it. This is what's happening right now."
Where are we right now?
That was on Paulo's end step, and now it's the upkeep here for Carlos. He is going to put the card in the bin, and that's going to let his search for his Canta flip. And here comes commence the endgame, and you know, Paulo does need to start commencing some endgames here. Another Shark Typhoon? Are you serious?
Are you kidding? And the thing is, this is so rough, right? Carlos has answers. He can kill them, but he's just down 2 cards every single time he does it.
That's right. But this is interesting because Escanta the Sunken Ruin is a way for him to keep up if he can keep his life total high enough. Oh, and there's a Thoughtseize. That's a critical one here as well.
That is good.
Yeah, that'll force this other commence the endgame, and then he can take a Shark Typhoon.
But I mean, Paulo is the one that just has all the pressure in the world right now.
Right. And there it is, commence the endgame number 2. This one's going to be a 5/5 token. Or excuse me, make the token into a 9/9. I forgot. Uh-oh, what was that from Paulo? He just shook his head.
Oh, right, of course.
It piles them all up on the army, so now
right, you don't get a second token. You don't get a second token. That was a misstep, I believe. Paulo thinking that he would get a 4/4 and a 5/5, right? Yeah. Probably would have been better to wait and cycle Shark Typhoon and have 2 threats instead of 1, because now Carlos can simply just use a Baleful Mastery to get this 9/9 off the battlefield. Probably wants to do it before Paulo potentially draws a counterspell off the top.
It's funny. I forgot how a mask
Everybody
worked,
forgot.
So
let's be real.
Paulo. Yeah.
When's the last time? I'm talking to the viewers. When's the last time you all amassed multiple times
Right.
in historic.
Right.
You know?
It doesn't happen very often. But Paulo, he could have cycled Shark Typhoon and said, okay, you get to take away my other commence, but I've got 2 threats out. And that's not what happened.
This is actually, I mean, that was huge, Marshall.
Yeah.
Because now Paulo is down to his last Shark Typhoon from what he has in his hand, and Carlos has the answer for that. And then Carlos is the one who's got an Ascanta to the Sunken Ruin. Carlos is the one with a negate and a Shark Typhoon that Paulo has to fight through.
Boy, you see Paulo's really beating himself up about that. He keeps just looking to the side, hitting his forehead. He's just like, I cannot believe that I did that. Because, yeah, now he's close to out of gas. I mean, he's going to have to find something big with his Shark Typhoon, or it could get ugly here for Paulo.
Right, because he's gone through both of his commence the end games, right? So that's not another card that you can find. You just want all the Shark Typhoons in the world.
Dude, why is Carlos playing so slow? Like, he's under 5 minutes, and like...
That's a good point, Marshall, because his deck does not have a lot of win conditions.
Right. It's not like he can just close out the game once he gets control of it. He could have a virtual 90-something% chance to win and not be able to actually do it in the time frame. I mean, just right now, he's taken 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Like, are you not killing a shark?
I guess not. And now Paulo...
And he's just going to do it now anyway.
He's going to do it now. And now Paulo has Mizzix's Mastery, and he's going to target the commence the endgame, so Carlos will have to counter the Mizzix's Mastery. Paulo can also choose the Expressive Iteration first to see if he can find some kind of counterspell to protect the Mastery here as well.
I got to say, you know, Paul, we said before he's going to need to find some action. Holy smokes, did he find some action? Expressive Iteration into Mizzix's Mastery? That is exactly what he wanted to see. That's I mean, if he goes for iteration, Carlos has to consider negating that. Like,
well, so if Paulo can find a mystical dispute here off Expressive Iteration, then you can cast a Mizzix's Mastery on commence the endgame and have dispute backup.
I wonder what Carlos does if it's just Expressive Iteration on the stack. It looks like it's going to be.
He's just going for the overload.
Wow, he's just going huge.
Wow.
Well, this is an obvious play now for Carlos Romao. He just needs to get rid of it. Okay, there's a fatal push. That'll give him a little bit of an insurance plan, but it doesn't do a whole lot right here.
Yeah, keep in mind Carlos does only have one negate in his deck, but he does have a bunch of memory lapses.
Right, okay, so you're talking about why Paulo might just want to go for it there?
Right. Just thinking about the different 2-mana counters that Carlo might have had access to there.
Right, because remember, the Mystical Dispute doesn't apply there for the Mystics' Mastery on the cheap.
And now he knows about Drown in the Lock, so he needs to find a Mystical Dispute here, or some kind of counterspell to fight through this Drown in the Lock.
What does Carlos do? I mean, I don't think you really want your opponent to resolve an Expressive Iteration, but there's certainly much worse that they could do here as well. Oh, he's under...
is he going to do it?
I think he's going to. He's going to counter the Expressive Iteration, and this is going to open the floodgates potentially for Paulo Vitor. Now, he won't quite have the mana this turn, right? 1, 2, 3. No, not quite.
Yeah, but he can go for it next turn. And keep in mind, if you went for something like a Commence the Endgame now, it wouldn't even be very good, as he wouldn't be able to draw cards because Narset's on the battlefield.
Oh, this clock thing, Paul. I know that Carlos is in a tricky spot, but now he's debating on whether to fatal push the Narset, or excuse me, the token to protect his Narset, keep it on the battlefield for an additional turn. It could be really important. I mean, especially with what we know.
He's got 3 minutes left on the clock, and he's not close to winning right now.
No, that was 30 seconds to make that choice. I'm starting to wonder if he's locking himself out by not just going with pure instinct plays, you know? Like,
yeah, is he
now, like, minus it, put Brainstorm on the stack, cast Shark Typhoon. You know, you just have to start doing stuff.
Yeah, what's happening here? Is he aware that the clock is at 2? It doesn't seem like he's aware that the clock is this low. Thoughtseize was huge.
There's a Thoughtseize off of the Narset. What a blowout. Paulo Vitor, he can't believe what he's seen here either. He had it, the Mizzix's Mastery for next turn, and it's just nothing now.
Jeez.
Back to cold top decking, and it's a land off the top. Now, Paulo's best chance looks to be the clock
Carlos, you got a cycle here. Start putting some pressure.
Dude. Yeah, he just...
The thing is, whatever you do, it's not going to be that much worse than anything else you could do, right?
Right.
They're all card draw effects. Just cast them.
Just go with your first instinct. Whatever stands out to you. Paul, I'm just not seeing it.
Well, the thing is, oh wow, that's the second Shark Typhoon. I mean, I imagine he's gonna take. What is happening here?
I mean, he should have already had a 4/4 shark on the back, or a 3/3 shark, and start bashing with the thing.
Brainstorm.
He knows about Perilous Voyage, so I guess he doesn't want to throw a shark into it.
Right, but then when he did the brainstorm, he could have set it up where he goes Inquisition into shark.
Right.
Right.
Yes, he had the answer. Are his sharks just gone now?
Okay, that's a Shark Typhoon. That's big.
Yeah, that could close out the game in the other direction.
This is a good brainstorm. He can shuffle away some threats here.
Yeah, this is really tough because getting rid of those 2 Shark Typhoons for Carlos, I don't see how he can actually get the win. You know,
yeah, he's at 1 minute and 20 seconds.
Right. He needed those 2 Shark Typhoons. He needed to get them on the battlefield. And now he just has no pressure at all. I mean, his best he can do is start jacing, but that's way too slow. He's also going to be facing down just a massive shark here. Yeah, the Perilous Voyage will be gone, but I mean...
Yeah, but Carlos needs to find an answer for the shark. Now, he does have... I mean, he does have an active Ascanta along with the ability to play Narset next turn, and he's not going to die immediately. So I think he's pretty likely to find an answer for this shark. But again, I mean...
Doesn't matter, does it? It's over. I mean, he's got a minute left. He cannot get him from 16 to 0 with this hand.
Yeah, as he cycled away the sharks,
Oh, this is sad. I hate to see this. But Carlos just did not respect the clock when he was sitting at, say, 5 minutes enough, and he took way too much time on each decision. And I mean, this is a really complicated matchup, so I totally get it, but it's costing him here. It's going to cost him the game.
Yeah, it is extremely important to have that extra gear and to be able to play at, 70% capacity.
Yep.
Because especially when you play a deck like this, right? Sometimes you're just going to have really long, grindy games. That's the nature of the way you built your deck. So you need to be able to kind of have this autopilot mode that allows you to just, be able to close out these games. And now, I mean,
he's just given up. Like he's just like that. When he was just looking through his graveyard there, his clock was running. Like,
yep.
He just knows it's over now, and he's just given up. And I mean, it is over now. Yeah. It is interesting to think of that, having that extra gear where you're giving up percentage points, but you are giving yourself a chance to win. We often give Gabriel Nassif trouble for the speed at which he plays, but he does have that gear, and that's it. There's the clock. It is down to nothing, and it is over. Paulo Vitor, Damo Rosa picks up the match.